Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anthony Salas, and on behalf of the American Marketing Association, I'd like to welcome you to today's member-only webcast titled The Power of Influencer Marketing. As a member of the AMA, you have access to the latest thinking and emerging trends via our website, ama.org, and publications, popular networking opportunities via professional chapters, and the AMA's Career Resource Center. So be sure to take full advantage of all these offerings to get the most from your membership. And before starting today, just a few quick housekeeping items to go over with you. The full presentation is being recorded, and we will make this available to you very soon after, so look for an email coming your way. If you have any technical or content-related questions, please use that chat feature that you see there to the left of your screen. Technical questions, we'll get to those as quickly as possible, and content questions, we do ask that you enter those as the presentation goes on, and we will be addressing them at the end of the formal presentation. And if you can join us today on Twitter, we would appreciate your engagement at hashtag AMAMOW. So feel free to send out some tweets as the presentation goes on. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers joining us today, both coming to us from Sway Group. We're being joined by Allison Talamantez, who is the Chief Revenue Officer, and Francesca Banducci, who is the Chief Operations Officer. And Allison and Francesca have a lot of really great insights that they're going to be sharing with you over the next hour. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison to start today's presentation.
Thanks, Anthony. We're super happy to be here. We're going to talk to you guys about the power of influencer marketing. Having been around in the business of blogging, a lot of us since 2005, 2006, from both personal and business capacities, sometimes we feel that blogging or influencer marketing is really second nature to us at Sway Group. So we have watched it evolve from its infancy to what it is now, and we're really, really excited about seeing big brands and big companies and agencies really kind of understanding the power that comes from an influencer, whether that's a digital influencer on a specific platform or multiple platforms, to even that awesome mom in a PTA. So as Anthony mentioned, I have my business partner, Francesca Banducci, who leads all of kind of our operations and really actually makes the magic happen at Play Group. And so we want to walk through for you guys a little bit more about what we do and how we came to the space where we are. So I'm going to actually let Francesca take you guys through that really specific process. Go ahead, Fran.
Thanks, Allison. I'm really excited to be here today too and kind of connect with the AMA audience. In terms of our evolution as a company, it really is, sometimes where they say the best things in life happen over coffee, and in our case it was over breakfast. And my business partner and I, Tiffany Romero, had been managing a community of bloggers for many years, and it was something that had grown organically in the space of women just really looking to connect online and share their stories, if it's as a mom to a toddler, as a creative, as a woman who may be working part-time or full-time. So many different people from different walks of life. And the commonality that all of this demographic shared was their platform and their need to be heard. And one of the great things we realized early on was we had such a natural affinity for connecting and for bringing people together. But what we did not have was the second half of that puzzle, which was the business acumen and the ability to kind of help influencers take their platform to the next level and integrate a brand or key message into an organic story that they were already telling. And getting back to the breakfast table that we sat at many years ago, that's where Allison and our CEO, Danielle Wiley, entered the scene. And it was through many years of working together that we were able to evolve Sway into what it is today, a digital marketing agency that specializes in influencer management and influencer content. So on that note, I think it brings us to our agenda for today. Here we have what we're going to be covering, talking a little bit about today's consumer, going through the evolution of influencer marketing, talking about who today's influencers are. Who are the women that you, or men, or teens, or whatever the demographic is that you're looking to use. Who are those people in the space who are successfully telling their story? When is influencer marketing a fit? Best practices for working with influencers, which is definitely something that we specialize in Sway Group. And then we'll open it up for, we'll go through several questions with Anthony in terms of our Q&A. Okay. So today's consumer, who are they? And what are they looking for? We have some interesting stats here on this next slide. I can figure out where the controls are. Here we go. In terms of who today's consumers are, we're looking at, a community of users who are highly engaged online. And you see this in everyday life. You see it from, parents at the sidelines of the soccer game, especially now that we're heading into fall, on their phones, kind of looking at Facebook. You see it, people connecting, in the mobile world that we live in. There is no, I'll do it after work or I'll do it on the weekends. That type of communication is happening all day, every day, day, night, holidays, etc. So 55% of active social media moms purchase based on blogger recommendations. Getting back to the notion of the stories that people are telling.
And one of the things, Fran, that I find really, really interesting about this particular stat is that when we first started working in the world of what we would consider today sponsored content and that kind of stuff, the ratio of that content and even people who were doing it was so much lower. And what's very interesting about that, though, is the shift of the statistic in the percentage of people that are influenced by blogger recommendations has not changed that dramatically. I think it's changed plus or minus like a 6 to 8% variance depending on where you look from those original stats that we started gathering in the 2010-2011 timeframe. So it really shows that this, influencers and blogging and, women specifically going out and seeking recommendations from individuals who have a platform is still very, very relevant.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great lead-in to the next point, where that talks about the user-generated content, or the UGC, is actually 20% more influential, especially to millennials, when it comes to purchase, and 35% more memorable. And I think people see this in their everyday lives. So if you're reading an ad online, or a pop-up display, things like that, versus when you're drawn into a story about a brand or a product and how it's affected someone's life, or how it's made everyday weeknight dinners easier or faster. That's something that people not only read and are actively engaged in, but it's something that's memorable.
And something that,
please.
I'm sorry, I was going to just add one more thing, and I think for this particular piece of user-generated content, you don't always have to think about user-generated content being distributed on publishers' websites. You can look at your own owned media blog or your own media channels, and we can activate influencers in a work-for-hire capacity. Anyone can do this, for the record, just as a way to help grow the voice and make the content that you're putting out as a brand more relevant. So you're working as a partner with an influencer to really give your consumer content that's going to be exciting and engaging and relevant to them through your own channels. So it's also, we all know that content is so such a challenge to build a content library and all of those things that go into it. And looking at influencers also from the lens of like, hey, maybe I can hire them to be on my team and to help me with my own channels. And that is going to also be more engaging to a millennial audience specifically, but more often than not most consumers in general.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great point, because there is, not only the practicality of understanding how to be a publisher online and what makes you successful, but then there are also, the nuances of metrics and other things that, as a brand or agency you may not readily have access to. So by using those subject matter experts in this area especially, you can make your campaign go miles and miles farther. So on that note, let's talk about the evolution of influencer marketing. Many years ago, I think it was really direct email outreach, where you may have a generic message that was going out to influencers. Nothing at all personalized, more along the lines of, hey, I have a product, and if it's barbecue sauce or if it's soap or dishwashing detergent, I'm going to give you this product for free. It's going to show up at your doorstep, and you're going to write a post. Great.
Dear Mommy Blogger.
Yes, the days of the Dear Mommy Blogger. But with all great things, it certainly worked for a while, but it needed to evolve. And it needed to evolve because, one, that's not really a sustainable model. But two, as a brand or agency, you don't really have any guarantee as to the content that's going to be created. You're not in a working relationship with an influencer where you're understanding like, okay, I'm giving you this product and we can count on the post being published at a certain date or time, or we can even guarantee what you might write about.
And there's also an element of risk in those early days, because so much of it was a giveaway or a review component that I get your barbecue sauce and I A, hate it, and I B, bring out into hives, and suddenly I'm mouthing off to the entire internet about that. And when there's a more formal business relationship, that the risk of that is substantially lowered.
It's absolutely controlled. After the days of the Dear Mommy Blogger, we went to directories of review and giveaway blogs. And, while that certainly worked for a while, again, the industry turned to a place of being much more, functional and engaging. So we are now probably more in the day and age where you see not only bloggers, but also anyone of influence. YouTubers, Instagrammers, etc., who have turned into more of spokespeople. Because let's face it, if you have a millennial YouTuber who can tell you about what they're using to wash their hair, that translates into dollars and cents. That translates into sales. There's certainly different degrees of that. Sometimes you can see more brand lift, and sometimes you do have that really hard end result ROI. But either way, I think it's a really exciting time as to how influencers can shape, these marketing campaigns and be integrated into larger programs and larger plans.
And I think it also speaks a lot to just today's consumer, right? It's the way that our, generation by generation, right? Boomers versus X versus and I'm Z, how we consume media as a whole is also where you're going to find a lot of those influencers. So sometimes, a really great spokesperson that's a celebrity is going to impact certain groups, but there are a lot of 11-year-olds who don't turn on the TV. They only watch YouTube. So to hire someone really fabulous from television is probably not going to be necessarily the one who resonates the most with them versus, to your point, a YouTuber or whatever. And because of our lives in terms of how we work so much and that kind of thing, even as moms, to go back to kind of that female, 25-54 sweet spot of buying power, we look at those women today are in an office, in a workforce, and they're not watching television. They're not necessarily sitting in front of a Procter & Gamble soap opera, right? they are able to go over to their favorite blog or check into their favorite forum or on Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may be, and to your point, Fran, also in your hand. And that's where I think the evolution so much is not only the evolution of the influencer marketing, right, but it's consumers and their own media consumption.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And that brings us to the last bullet, or essentially circle on this slide, where you're looking at sponsored content being kind of the new norm. And take us to the next slide here. So today's influencer. We've talked a little bit about who they are. Off the top, many people are familiar with blogs, and that we talk about influencers in the context of blogging. And that is certainly one interpretation of it, and widely used. But I think that you also have to think more broadly when it comes to an influencer. And it's actually why at Sway Group we don't always use the vernacular of, oh, we're hiring bloggers. Because you can hire someone who is very influential on Facebook and who can share a message with their community and have them follow that call to action, but maybe they don't have a big presence on Pinterest. And that's okay, because what it is you're playing this almost like matchmaking game of, we know what this end program needs to be. We know what the results are you're looking for, what is going to show and demonstrate the return on the spend. But what we need to do is go back and kind of backtrack from that and find the influencers who are going to be the most organic fit to get you to that end result. And let's face it, while most social platforms are all photo-based, there are definitely, different types of brands and campaigns do better on select platforms. Allison, I know you had something you want to say.
No, I was just going to say, I think, too, influencers don't necessarily and it also varies by those generations, right? You're going to be hard-pressed to find someone from Generation Z with a blog that has real
Absolutely.
Impact as a blog. But that does not mean, by golly, that they're not influential and that they're not doing that. I also think that we, as we look to these younger generations, even on the younger end or that middle sweet spot of a millennial world, you find, I think there's a lot of power in real world influencers. So again, those on the ground. And I think it's the thing about today's influencers is that, yes, you need to find, the Ricky Dillon of the world or the big person that's going to be this fantastic mouthpiece for a brand, but you also have to pair that with a mix of people to typically achieve the KPI or the goal that you're pacing against in a marketing program or on an initiative-based execution. And so when you look at that, I think that's where as a marketer, you kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, I want to buy a drill, but what do I want? What kind of hole do I want? So what kind of bit am I going to choose? And it's oftentimes a combination of different influencers and how they impact that. So it's talking about and really getting granular into okay, so we want people with large communities of followers because we need that reach and frequency element, but we also need high engagement. So we all know that community size and influence are directly related, right? If I am within the walls of my home, and I'm far more influential over the type of toothpaste my husband uses than I am over any other person in the world because I actually buy it. So how do we get that mix of, he may not like that I buy that kind of toothpaste, but he's going to use it. And how do we get that person that you read, but then you also get the aspirational value and everything else that comes along with any type of influencer or spokesperson work. So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all when you look at influencers, and it's not necessarily one tactic. It's oftentimes a layered program to really achieve, especially when you're looking at it from a larger brand or marketing, program.
Absolutely. And I think that really sums up the points on the slide that we're currently on. So in looking at why digital influencers bring value to a specific audience, it's because of those large community of followers. It's that they're talking about their authentic personal experience. and that they're actually speaking to an audience that they have an established trust, they have an established relationship with. So it isn't just a bullhorn and it's going out to the masses. It's people who are engaged and who are following for a specific reason. They have bought in to the space. They have bought into that particular person, and I think that's what makes all of these campaigns so dynamic and so exciting to work on. So when is influencer marketing a fit? That's you, Miss Allison.
That is me. I think one thing that happens when you are either, at the table after you've gotten kind of the direction of a brand for the year, or when you're sitting around in the brainstorm for what do we want to do, that kind of thing. So often, I think influencer marketing can be really scary because you do want it to be authentic and you do want it to be real and you do want it to have that real deal, we can do this, can-do attitude that makes influencer marketing great. And we want content to be real, and we want to take the messages of a brand and we want to weave it into a story that really is going to resonate with that audience. And I think that because it can be kind of scary, sometimes people are like, well, influencer marketing can only be a fit if there's an event and I need someone there. And that happens, or that kind of thing. I think that we're moving in today's world to something that is showcasing that because of media consumption habits and because of everything that's going on in today's world and the on-the-go nature of us as a society, we need to find these influencer fits more often, and we need to hit people in different capacities than we used to. So, obviously there's that ongoing building brand ambassador. You're looking for somebody to have a depth of relationship with that oftentimes can be so impactful because people are like, okay, well, she's worked with this brand over and over and over again, so she must really like them, and she has new, usage opportunities and then promotions that she's showing, and it's really authentic and great. Sometimes when you're looking at a call to action, so if you are, a retail marketing group and you're like, I need this number of coupon downloads within this period of time period, we can use a certain mix of influencers to really, really help to go forth on that. And that's something that can, be planned ahead of time when if you're a key account manager for a brand and you work on a large retail account, groups can work with you to say, okay, well, if your product is going to be on ad, these weeks, and these weeks, then let's talk about utilizing the right type of influencers in the right mix to do that. Maybe it's long-form content, maybe it's not. Introductions of products as we launch, obviously creating that, swell of a buzz to the community, getting people to really say like, oh, I want to try that new exciting thing is always an impact. And I like to look at really specific demographics. This is kind of my favorite thing about influencer marketing as a whole is I am in my real life a huge glossy magazine lover. Everyone loves me because I read them and I give them away, and I think I have almost every single subscription for my type of demographic that you possibly could. Francesca can attest to this. And
amen to that, yes.
I look at influencers like the world's best magazine. So if I am a brand and I am focusing on women 25 to 54 who are health conscious, I know as a marketer or as a media planner or whatever that, the difference between someone who reads Shape, someone who reads Health, someone who reads Mind and Body, and someone who reads Muscle and Fitness Her, and someone who reads Runner's World are all very, 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 very different women, right? They have this commonality. They have this common interest. And my product as a brand is probably going to be relevant to them. But the difference between Muscle and Fitness Her and Shape is vastly different. So what I like to think about when I look at platforms is you have the opportunity to just open that demographic to no end. And when you look at that and let's say you do something with 40 publishers within your demographic, chances are you're going to come out with 40 sponsored content pieces that read like a story or an typically better than an advertorial because they're very, very real and have this very specific spin on your brand or your product that is going to resonate with that type of consumer. So, as someone who grew up in the South who has this insanely frizzy hair and I don't go anywhere without makeup on, if I'm going to tell a story about a hairdryer, you'd better believe it's going to talk about frizz control and time and, all of these things. And my dear, dear friend and partner, Francesca Banducci, who loves to do crazy, crazy things with her hair, are probably going to talk about, the ability for it to I don't know. I don't even know because you're so different than me in a hair thing, but we're so similar. Like we would buy the same product, and that's the point. But if I read a post about the things that are going to resonate about a hairdryer to Francesca, it's not going to resonate with me. But that doesn't mean we both don't want the same hairdryer. And that's where I think influencer marketing gets really exciting, is that you can get down to that in a cost-effective capacity, you can get down to that granular, compelling storytelling that's going to really, really hit the consumer at any level of the funnel, depending on the tactic that you use. You can also share facts with the community, immediate updates. I mean, there's ways to use influencers in, crisis management, changing the conversation, those types of things. They're at the end of the day, they really, really are fantastic publisher platforms that have different talent skill sets, just as every different one does, and we can really work with them and you to make things resonate. So, you need a long-term spokesperson like a Kelly Ripa or an Ashton Kutcher, and they're out of your budget. That happens a lot of times.
That
one
9 times out of 10.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be honest with you. I really, really want a Tesla SUV, but it's not happening at this moment in time. So I don't have that car. I have a different car that I love just as much. But I think the thing is that with influencers, it is that combination. So you can also tier it. So you can get even a great online rock star is 99% of the time going to be less expensive than a celebrity name. And you can pair it with some beef underneath it and those types of things to get, again, that reach and frequency at a really good price point. You need to, send people to this content that you've created, and it's like content is so expensive to create, and it's so hard to create, right? Like it's so hard to figure out what are we going to talk about and what's going to resonate and then what are we going to do, and then you put it out there and it kind of sits sometimes. When you hire influencers, and this I really think is where you look at like a scalability and you look at short form sharing elements to really go and say, hey, go see this content, go see this content. And sometimes it's also taking, I would even recommend like you maybe a step before this, right? So maybe you haven't created the latest white paper or the latest infographic, but you have all this great research from your data team or whatever. And then coming to influencers or influencer groups and saying like, hey, what do we do with this data? How do we put this data in a package that's going to resonate with those people that I want to buy? How do I take that and put it into something? Because sometimes, going back to the user-generated, if you have the raw data, influencers can help you create infographics and white papers and stories around that data that are going to just be impactful because they're created by somebody else and they don't necessarily look like a marketing material.
I think what's really interesting with respect to this point is looking at this concept in through the lens of very traditional businesses. So if you're in banking or you're in even pharmaceuticals, obviously not the most easy to talk about topics online, certainly not very visual. But what is interesting is taking some of that messaging and figuring out how can you spin it so that it does resonate on a platform like Pinterest. Because the brands that are really winning the game are those who are kind of thinking outside the box when it comes to getting
Absolutely.
creative with how you're delivering your messaging. So it's not just like, oh, we have it on our website and we have minimal graphics and things, but 9 times out of 10 I'm so surprised and actually quite happy about how you can take things like saving or opening up a new checking account for the 4th of July and make it more about being American and all the great notions that come with celebrating our nation's independence, and then pushing that out on social and seeing it just fly. Because you have to really get out of the traditional funnels of media, and when you start to think outside the box, especially in the context of influencer management, I think that's where you really start to see messaging take wings and come to life.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm always amazed with like a content library or when you take kind of those data and pieces, or even if it is like, you created this great, 30-second video spot that's running on television or 60-second video spot that's running on TV. And when you have influencers, even if it's just embedding that into their own post where they're taking the story and the key messages that you've told and then showcasing what they're taking away from this, this is oftentimes really, really great for B2B brands that are really trying to show like your global impact, or whatever. And we go through and we're like, oh gosh, that, company, they help do this, this, and this for me, even though I have no idea what they really do. But the beauty of it is that you can get that story told over and over again, because what I take away from, something is going to be highly different than what Francesca takes away, or certainly, my neighbor down the street who's 10 years older than me and works in a super, super corporate job, so everyone has something different. And that's really where I think influencers can help take any of that content. And sometimes it's just amplifying it. And sometimes it's really saying like, let's get 50 new stories around this great piece of work that we spent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars creating and distributing, and let's get all of these new stories behind it. Obviously, product launches or driving traffic to a specific retailer, this is kind of the stuff I touched on before about like ads and that kind of thing. You can also, we work with a lot of groups where, they have multiple customers, and when you work and you look at it from, a Family Dollar customer is going to be very different than a Sam's Club customer. It's very different than Neiman Marcus's customer. And so again, the tactics that go into that and the influencer element that happens there is remarkable, and it can be done by an influencer. And there's numerous ways to do that. It's figuring out where do you fit into that list of folks. Specific audiences, we talked about that too, just kind of really that's the beauty of it. Many influencer groups, you can find influencers 100 million different ways. Google is a great resource for that. It's also incredibly time consuming, and so many influencer groups or whatever will have a technology platform that allows you to spit out the right people. Our experience has been also specifically when you're looking at something is it's a combination of the technology spitting out, the logarithm of folks that these people fit in there for you. But it's also paired with just that lens of knowing what's going on. So, maybe you're a toothbrush company and you only are targeting moms with kids that are 2 to 4 years old. And that's great. But what happens when this, one person on an influencer management team somewhere knows that this influencer who has a child who's on the autistic spectrum, and their kid will only brush their teeth with this, and suddenly that influencer is selling toothbrush after toothbrush after toothbrush. And so there's some power when you're looking for those very, very specific elements in having technology paired with the lens of just experience that just comes with time. And so I think that's something that you should watch out for when you're looking for influencers is not just necessarily saying, I'm going to let a computer do it for me, because actually that's kind of, it's a necessity, right? But it's also somewhat taking away from how influencer marketing became so impactful. Your product's going through recall, like I said, crisis management. A lot of times it can be, sharing facts, just as simple, and getting that out to the target conversation, and just, adding to a conversation that's not negative, so that it's not necessarily changing the conversation, but it's just showcasing support and that kind of thing. If y'all only knew how disorganized I am in my real life, and we changed slide numbers, so I'm looking over here, am I supposed to put the slide forward? And I am. So I'm going to send this over to Francesca. This would be why I don't actually operate your campaigns, because that would be really, really scary. And she's going to talk about kind of best practices for working with influencers and how we can do that.
Absolutely. So this is kind of our wheelhouse. And there are so many processes that we started with and have now evolved into something that is very system-based, because we have learned over the years what works when it comes to influencer management and really what doesn't. Let me just flip the slides here. There are a host of things that once you have your online rock star, or maybe even your influencer marketing campaign, which could be hundreds of different influencers all working in tandem, all promoting the same key messaging, within, it could be a quarter, it could be a month, heck, maybe it's even a week. But the nuances of managing large groups and kind of all of the unknowns that pop up. If it's, hey, my daughter is sick, and we're down for the count for the week, I can't publish, or if it's making sure that your metrics are being tracked. There's so many moving pieces and parts for anyone in the marketing industry. I know that you hear me. And it's really just staying on top of those targets and timelines and making sure that it all comes together in the end. So
it's also part of it is kind of like understanding, like, and just having that wherewithal of like, oh, so-and-so is allergic to shellfish, I shouldn't reach out to them about that. That takes a lot of, just time. It's labor intensive, whether you're the brand, whether you're the agency. And that's where so often is kind of looking too at those like do's and don'ts, right? We want to work with someone who has this. And so I think as a brand, something that is a great use of your time, right, is kind of filling out that map of like, these are our ideal influencers, this is what they look like, that we want to make sure they've never done this or they always do this. And then once, then working with someone to find them is helpful to the nth degree, because the time that goes into, years and years and years of archives of reading is a challenge.
Absolutely. And I think your points are so well made on this slide here, Allison, in terms of finding the right influencer. Because if you are looking for that vegan food blogger, they're not going to be interested in the latest fast food chicken wrap. And we can help you sidestep all of those, time sucks, or even, honestly, pitfalls. Because it's not good for you, and it's not good for the influencer to be engaging in that conversation if ultimately it's not a fit. So what we have, is our expertise, and we come to the table helped and ready to help people navigate, finding that right fit. You're also going to want to let the influencer guide the story. And, I say this with some warnings that kind of come with it. Like, are you handing over your marketing campaign in its entirety and saying, tell your story? No, not at all. But you're handing it over and giving them the reins to give their own personal interpretation or their own personal spin on the context that you've provided. And we do this a lot of different ways. You can do it in the sense of providing a writing prompt. So you wouldn't necessarily give an influencer a press release and say, okay, we want you to copy and paste this into your post, or we want you to amplify this on Facebook. But what you are giving them are the key points and the take-homes that you want to make sure resonate in that piece of content. But you're also giving them the freedom to bring their own life experience in as part of the content creation process and put it in their own context, because ultimately you've gone after this influencer because they're reaching that audience demographic that you're interested in. So let them do what they do best. Give them the freedom to shine, while also kind of putting up those guardrails or those side rails so that you're not kind of going off the road entirely. What you're seeing here on the slide is a fantastic program that we have done in the past, and this would work great for any retailer who is actually looking at the holidays right now and maybe selling specialty food items, holiday decor, where you give an influencer the flexibility to go into the store, purchase items, and then bring it into their home. I mean, everyone is interested, whether you're in marketing or not, in kind of holiday decoration and that DIY spin. And this is a great context to allow an influencer to really shine.
I also think there's a lot of power in looking at influencers' content that they created in the past that is already getting lots and lots of, whether it's seasonal content or something like that, and really kind of understanding like that part of it, because sometimes that can be the most powerful thing, is you almost just take their own words completely, and then we figure out the right fit for a specific brand, because that's where you can see not only the influence to their followers, right, but it's also those people who are going after organic search long tail keywords and figuring out what those are.
Absolutely. In the next slide you can see another piece of content where this whole notion of giving influencers that freedom really came through. And what's great is while you do have product placement in this, you also have something that exploded on Pinterest. Because in this context, the influencer was writing about a DIY holiday cookie bar. And that can manifest itself in so many different ways, in a kid's classroom, entertaining family and friends. It's definitely getting back to the roots of photo sharing and content that is relevant and highly searchable at certain times of the year. So that's another way that while you can give the influencer, again, that top level overview, you want them to bring that creative spin, because that's really the win when you go back and show like how a campaign performed. It's that out of the box thinking. On this next slide, we talk about the influencer guiding the engagement. So what do we mean by that? It's not allowing them to say, okay, well, I feel like maybe I'll tweet this on Twitter, or maybe I'll Periscope it. You're not giving them that sort of freedom. But you are giving them the instruction to help them maybe set up the backdrop. So in this particular slide, we're highlighting a series of live events. And this is a really interesting deliverable that I personally love, and is actually Allison's brainchild. It's the notion of kind of like if you think back to an old school Tupperware party, where women would get together and they would talk about the latest product or whatever that might be. And while that is great and certainly community building in the sense of people coming together face to face, it's done in a closed environment. So that you're talking about it in that moment, and then you're going home. What is great, and
there's only so much scale that goes with it, right? Like you're talking to 5 people, you're only talking to 5 people. That's what's so great about the internet, right? Like we can talk to 5 people, we talk to thousands of people.
Right. So in the context of taking that same model and then using influencers, now it becomes something that's not only being shared in the context of the home, but like Allison said, it's being amplified across the internet. And it's being amplified in a way of, look at what I'm doing right now. but also look at this entertaining space, or, again, the food, the decor, the event itself with the product at the center of it, and it's being shared. So in this particular case study that we're using, you, as a brand, think about what are those key marketing periods during the course of your calendar year. Is it back to school? Is it Super Bowl, holiday, things like that? And how can you create those live events using amplifiers to really capture the spirit of not only that exciting time of year, but then keeping the product kind of under the spotlight. And I love, in the context of doing a series of events, you can take that creative spin, and Allison, you could obviously speak to this better than I could, but utilize it across the course of many, many months.
Well, and I think that's one of the things too, right? Like obviously if you're, a food brand or a wine brand or whatever, like those are the best of the best when it comes to like a true blue entertainment piece, right? But don't, when you look at influencer marketing, you don't always have to think about it as just if you're a consumer product, because live parties can be excellent forums and platforms for touchy conversations. Let's say you're a vaccine, or you are, I don't know, like a new pharmaceutical product. Like these are places where really it's that one-on-one conversation, and really truly needing someone to say to you, like, it's going to be okay. Like, this is a good product, or this is safe, or this is exciting, or, what, this app is going to change your child with special needs life. And we can do the same thing with this, and that's where the influencers are so impactful, because you're going to be someone who is somewhere on the pendulum of that consumer, and allowing them to really bring that to life. And the thing that's great too when we work with these live parties, and depending on what they are, you can also bring in that real world consumer. So you're looking at, a specific DMA, and then you're looking at, okay, I have these influencers, and you know what, maybe they're bringing their friends, maybe they're bringing their kids, maybe they're bringing their tweens, maybe they're bringing their tweens and their tweens friends. And it really allows you to kind of scale from a digital standpoint, but also really have that footprint in the real world community, where as a brand, you're probably trying to make an impact at some point in another in a specific geography. So I think there's so much with these types of concepts, and allowing the influencers to take those messages and give, almost some compelling insight into their own audience or their own activation is often really where, the magic happens from an influencer.
Absolutely. And I think that point leads into, our next slide here quite beautifully. So, when you're building that deep and lasting relationship, Allison touched on earlier, you can do it in the sense of utilizing your influencer to handle those touchy subjects. In this particular example, we're looking at, I believe it was a recall situation. And so the influencer was able to communicate, the marketing points and kind of, those key deliverables that the brand certainly wanted out at a critical time. And I think that
it could be a piece of positive communication. I think at a
absolutely.
time where so often the biggest megaphones are loud, like use another big megaphone to just be factual.
And to strike the balance there in the conversation, absolutely.
So, I think a lot of times when we're looking at influencer marketing too, in the past it was often like, hey, we're going to, have, I want this brand to sponsor my nose clipping party. Like we had a time there where influencers were really doing some crazy things, and brands didn't really know, but we knew they were impactful, and so we kind of were just throwing money, and then suddenly, someone probably in finance was like, hey, we gotta, actually see something for this. So, looking at what are the goals and what are the KPIs in the same way that you would with any other buy. Obviously things like impressions and sales, engagement, and social media likes are a few examples of the metrics that can be thrown out there. But I also think when you're making these plans, if you're, on the brand or the agency side for a length of time, is it's also looking at like what funnel are we in? Because, a success metric or a conversion, and I'm using air quotes since you guys can't see me, I love air quotes. Conversion can be a click-through on the first time. And then it can be that, okay, we do another iteration, and that, conversion is sign up for an email test. Because at the end of the day, yes, we have metrics and we track them, and we any good group is going to give you those metrics. And any good group at this point in time is really having to defend those metrics because they really are powerful and impressive. The power of influencer marketing, though, does not come from taking a CPA or CPM metric toolbook and laying them over from an influencer activation. It's really looking at that long-term goal that you're driving at. So when I try to do that, when we're trying to have these conversations, is I try to look at what funnel are we in, and what is that path to purchase. And once we know those paths to purchases, we can look at tactics that are going to drive into, because in my mind, each piece of that process has its own funnel, right, of how do we get them there. And influencer marketing can be a great path to do that. With any of it, though, it's defining them from the upfront. If you don't, you can't cross the finish line holding hands, because if I cross one finish line and you cross the other finish line and we're like, what in the world happened? That's where we want to go through and really say, okay, what tactics are we going to do for this measurement? And not only for your team as the marketing team or the agency team, but also like what metrics do we need to send back to, research or finance or accounting so that we can get that budget up for next year? And really talk with your partners about that, because that's the important piece of it, is making sure that everyone's in a win-win scenario, where you're going to see the great influencer content, where like we're talking about, like your Let's Influencer Guide this, you get 45 new stories, everything exciting like that. But you also need to make sure that we are delivering the specific reporting pages back so that you can do it again next year, and hopefully with more money, right? So how do you define that? And as long as we get that from the upfront, also with reporting, as we're so in a data-driven world, let whomever it is that you're working with when you're doing influencer programs, or even internally as a team, understand what you are going to have to report on. Because in the world of social, tracking is relatively easy. Proactively. Tracking retroactively is challenging at the least. And so look at that. Like, make sure that you kind of identify too, like, okay, so when I finish this campaign, what do I need to put into this report? And that person who I'm sending that report to, what do they need to put into that report? I'd like to think like 2 steps down, because if you think that far, then we can track it on the upfront really, really easily. But when you're doing it retroactively, it can be a bit of a challenge. And then, obviously I think that there's a lot of benefits to working with any influencer network. I mean, time and understanding of who they are, understanding the efficiencies of it, the time, labor that goes into talking to, 50 bloggers and doing all of those things can be just, it is a full-time job. It's actually a full-time company job. And making sure that all the, contract necessities are met, and QA is done, and that the links all work, and the tweets are all disclosed, and everything like that. It allows that to happen. And, no one doubts the power of an influencer from a brand perspective, or just from a marketing mouthpiece. But just because they're great content creators doesn't mean they're all great business people. And that's where conduits come in, and can be really helpful. And frankly, a cost savings as well as risk averting for a brand. And then I think, let's see, again, it allows us to focus on the content for the influencers. So they're able to really look at, like, how do I make good content instead of having to talk to 25 brand managers or agency folks and negotiating those things to make a living on their own. And an influencer network of any kind provides, in some ways, right, it's almost like a temp agency because you have the opportunity to go in, you source your opportunities, you go out, you do your work, you go in, you don't have to worry about the hustle and the bustle of getting your resume out there and that kind of stuff. And really just education. I mean, there's a lot of things that any influencer network is going to teach, their content creators about, these are the elements that we need from a great content creation standpoint. These are the things that brands want to see. These are things brands don't want to see, which, is for us at the root of where our community before anything was in, before this world kind of even started, it was a platform for truly bloggers at the time to come and just like lift each other up and make pretty content and pretty projects, and wow, how we have gone. So thank you guys so much for having us today. Happy to open it up to kind of any questions you guys may have, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Allison and Francesca. Both great information. Really enjoyed all that sharing today. And just a quick reminder to everyone before we move into some questions, if you do still have a question, use that chat area and enter it there, and we'll add it to our list. We've got time for a good number of questions here, so we'll get to as many as our time allows. So with that, let's go ahead and move to our first question here. So let's see here. Question being, how does ROI of influencer marketing compare to traditional advertising?
I can go ahead and take that. I think if you're talking about it from a metric of like a CPM, or something like that, we can certainly work against those. It depends on, again, what kind of CPM you're looking at. But absolutely, there are traditional, metrics that we can utilize, and that's great. I don't think the industry as a whole has come to a great measurement standpoint of being able to, as a media planner or something like that, to be able to statistically understand, because it truly is like, did this person click this bit.ly to go to here, Like it's a hard process, and where are they in the funnel, and how long does it work? But what we know about influencer marketing is when it hits right and when it's tactically done correctly, you can move the needle both long-term, meaning I write a post about, a seasonal Christmas cookie, and that post works for me every single year that it's up when done properly. So, those conversion rates, those elements, they keep on happening for you. CPMs can come in a very finite period of time. If you're comparing it against like a cost per acquisition, banner buy, that gets harder just because of the technology, and if it hits right and the right combination of things, and also just the type of product it is. Things can be very getting the number of conversions for the most part, when you're partnering with influencers, people are super specialized in the vertical of influencers. And so, the way something converts for a car versus the way something converts for soup it's just different. It's a different tactic, right? So we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And anytime you're looking at an influencer program, there are some, quick tactics that you can use. But you should be really looking at like the end game and almost looking at it like an algebra problem and working backwards from there to figure out what the strategy is so that you can make sure you're doing the right things and getting the right metrics to get the ROI if it needs to compare to advertising. All
right, thank you so much there. So another great question just came in here. So how does someone go about selecting the right influencers for them?
I can take that. This is Francesca. I think in terms of selecting the right influencers, you really want to start by asking the right questions. And you can't do that until you know what it is you want your end result to be. So are you looking for beautiful pictures? Are you looking for people to write long, intricate stories? Be very aware of what you want to be at on the very last day of the campaign and what deliverables you want in hand. And then it's just a process of working backwards. So once you know what it is that you're going towards, you can kind of backtrack and figure out, all right, well, for a particular campaign on Pinterest, we'll use it as an example, maybe I'm looking for people in a very specific vertical if it has to do with food, and I'm looking for a certain level of influence. There's certainly a lot of influencers in the space, but Susie Q is not the same as Betty Boop because perhaps one has bigger numbers, perhaps she pins a lot of weeknight chicken casserole recipes, and you are a big player in the world of chicken, and that is your wheelhouse. So you really have to just kind of play a matchmaking game, and there are certainly agencies that can help you do it. If you're doing it on your own, I think you're thoughtful about who it is you're going after, and then also as part of the process of finding the right influencers, make sure that you're being very clear on what the deliverables are. So what is the ask? And you want to make sure you have all of that information in hand up front. So it certainly goes to the logistics of, we want you to write a blog post that has a minimum of 350 words because that is going to make it searchable and friendly towards Google. We want you to have X number of amplifications on, say it's Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. But more than that, I need to know that you are home during the week of October 16th to publish. I need to know that you have a Walmart in your area that you can visit and redeem a coupon. I need to know that you're not going to write about a competitor of mine as a brand for the next 30 days or 6 months or whatever that is. But the bottom line is you want to come to your influencer with your full picture and knowing exactly what the ask is, because the more you pepper that conversation and you go back and forth and you say and then and how about or would you mind, not only do you lose their attention and you lose their commitment to the program, but you also lose, if they stay on it, you lose your end product. Because with anything, you want to give them that full, complete picture and let them know exactly what they're in for. Because you also, they need to feel like their work is being adequately compensated as well. And that's where you end up with that really winning piece of content in the end.
Great response. Thank you so much there. I believe we've got time, looks like, for probably one more question here. This one that just came in, I really kind of like it. I think maybe we'll tie it all together here. So we kind of had a question earlier about how ROI is different, with influencer versus traditional advertising. So maybe let's close it up with talking about what the real benefit is of influencer marketing over traditional advertising.
I can take that. I think that one thing I would caution you if you talk to anybody who says that influencer marketing is the end-all be-all of the world and traditional advertising is going to go away and we're never going to see it again. That's just crazy talk, and we should not do that. Is there a growing and very large seat at the table for influencer marketing? Absolutely. I think the benefits that come from influencer marketing versus, traditional advertising are not necessarily completely siloed, right? Like we've for years been looking at spokespeople and, radio endorsements and those types of things to really impact and get that buy-in from people. But the benefit at the end of the day is you just get more of it. You just have the opportunity to reach more of it, and you have the opportunity to hit the same person using the same channel. And by channel, I'm kind of saying that each publisher would be considered a channel. But you can reach them in 7 different ways. Maybe you look at an influencer and you have them, do a Facebook share, and they do a pin, and they do a blog post, and they do an email, and then 3 months later they do another post or something like that. Like, there's all different kinds of ways, but you can really get buy-in from the consumer through that influencer or through a multitude of influencers, because so often we don't just, I don't know, other than maybe like my father, who has literally like his actual family are his only Facebook friends. So like other than that, we're all kind of exposed and we follow different people and that kind of thing. And so, you have the opportunity to really get that reach and that frequency, and you should be pairing it with, if your budget permits, you should be pairing it with some more traditional advertising, because that's just that layer, and that's how we get, consumers and become to the top of their mind, so that when they are at that purchase point, depending on their price point, depending on our pocket or our product and our path to purchase, that you're there and you're seen in a positive light, and they know the conversation and they know the benefits and the features of what you're selling. It's specificity, it's, the cadence and timing and being able to be there, be on different areas with the same, continuous feel that influencer marketing allows you. But I don't know that you would want to look at and say, like, one can't live without the other. I think they really, they're a nice fit together, and they both have benefits. So, did that answer your question?
I think that's a great answer. So definitely a compliment there, and keep it going on both sides, it sounds like. So great response. Allison and Francesca, I can't thank you both enough for all this great information. It's been a really insightful time, and really, really do appreciate both being here today. So thank you on behalf of the audience to both of you for being here.
Thank you
for having us.
And just a couple of quick reminders to everyone as we conclude our webcast today. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is all being recorded. We're going to share a link to the recording with you so you can go back and revisit all this great information. You can also share it with others who might find it of interest, so look for that coming your way very soon. To those of you that were also able to join on Twitter, we really appreciate your engagement there. If you weren't able to join, you can still go post-webcast and engage at hashtag AMAMOW. And here in just a moment, we're going to redirect you to our survey page. And if you would take just a moment or two and let us know what you thought of today's webcast, and also let us know what other topics you want to see presented on future AMA webcasts. We really want to make sure that we are providing you with the insights and information that you're looking for, so we appreciate you helping us out with that. So in closing, again, a big thank you to Allison and Francesca for spending this time with us today. I want to thank all of you, our AMA members, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon on another webcast. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.